Say you get hired to come into a company and coach one of the CEO of the company or a leader at the company. What does that process look like? What is the first 30-day kind of rollout, or what are you going to do with that person first?
Wow, that's a really specific question, Costa. So, believe it or not, it starts with the relationship. You really have to establish openness and transparency and trust. So, my job is not to show up as the expert, is to show up and really establish a relationship. And for some people, that's very easy to do. But we all know for some people, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more skeptical, especially if they're not necessarily wanting to be there initially. You've got to be patient. You'll let that evolve. So establishing a relationship, establishing trust, establishing openness and transparency and confidentiality, that we're here for each other, that I'm here to get to know you and you're here to get to know me, that we're really trying to develop a partnership. That's really, really critical. And that evolves differently depending on the person's personality. The second thing is creating really investment of time into the process and the program, meaning we're going to meet at least every 2 weeks, sometimes weekly, depending on the urgency of the issues or the needs or the complexity. So, it's kind of laying a groundwork and foundation of expectations of how often we're going to meet, what are we going to work on? What does the process look like? And frankly, depending on the executive of the organization, the culture, the process is going to evolve organically or change depending on what we're trying to work on. But going to, what we talked about earlier, it starts with self-awareness. So if they haven't done it, I'm going to put them through a behavioral assessment, a tool I like. I'm a huge fan of called the Predictive Index, or PI, which I talk about in the book. I'm also going to do a verbal 360 assessment, which are interviews to talk to peers, a boss if they have one, and then direct reports as well as other key stakeholders. So I can really understand this person in a very comprehensive way. Then I'm going to provide a feedback report, confidential, doesn't say who said what, that summarizes, how they're perceived, both in terms of their strengths as well as their potential development opportunities. And not just opportunities in general, to be more aware of the impact they have on others. And I'm also, in that report, I'm also going to capture their self-assessment to say, hey, this is how you assessed yourself. Here's how you're seen by others. What's similar? What's different? Where are the gaps? How do you reconcile that? And then we're going to put together essentially an action plan. And then, of course, in between all that, there's coaching, there's discussions. We're going to talk about real life situations. Most leaders today have conflict, right? How do I deal with the conflict of my direct report or my peer or key person in my organization, or maybe someone on the board? So how do I deal with a relationship that's gone sour or that's not effective? Or how do I deal with getting my organization through a massive change? Or how do I get them to another level of effectiveness and success? Maybe it's my leadership team. Maybe we're not aligned. How do I gain greater alignment? Maybe I have a cultural issue with my organization. How do I create a stronger culture? So there's a litany of potential additional, what I call strategic issues and needs and challenges that we're going to get into. So part of it's coaching, which is where I started with in terms of the self-awareness and the interviews and the feedback. But there's also what I call the advisory role or the consulting role, which is the strategic part of their job and how to be effective. So I try to do a hybrid approach. Honestly, Costa, I'm not the traditional coach is really going to focus on the behavioral side. I think that's really foundational, critical, but it can't be all about that. And frankly, a lot of leaders today have been through all that. So for them, it's missing tools and knowledge in their toolbox and how to get to the next level.